Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to this response to the apostate Aladdin. I was deliberating whether or not to make separate videos like 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10, or just make one long video and timestamp some of that PDF document that I tend to make alongside refutation videos, response videos. I opted for the latter as I prefer doing that. To the apostate Aladdin, if you're watching this, hello. Watch this video from start to finish. Inshallah, it will benefit you. If you are sincere, you are honest and you are fair, watch this video from start to finish, check the links in the description, and, may Allah guide you back to Islam if you are sincere. I sometimes tend to provide you an introduction with my refutation videos, my response videos, of what we can expect from the opponent. From Aladdin, he's going to show us the world, but unfortunately, it's not going to be shining, it's not shimmering, and it's not splendid. Without further ado, I guess all I can say now is...
Okay, let's go.
Most start between the age of 2 and 4 years old. Let's presume it was 3. خير الأمور أوسطها. Let's take the middle. 3. So at age 1, she was able to crawl. At age 3, she was able to go to the washroom by herself. And after 3 more years, we're supposed to believe that she was mentally present enough to make a lifelong decision. The reality is she was handed off by her father, right? That's just the reality of it. But Muslims today realize how bad of a look that is, or at least some of them thankfully do. And they try to say that, you know what, she made that decision and she could have went back on it, which I'm going to talk about later. Let's look about some of the milestones by age 3. They were saying, well, why don't you hear in a hadith that she said she didn't like it? So the fact that maybe she never did, maybe she never, aside from her objection to Muhammad's God, following his desires all the time, maybe she never actually said, I don't like my marriage, it's a bad marriage. That's fine. That doesn't change the fact that setting a precedent to marry children is going to cause harm in other situations as well. It doesn't change the fact that if she was married at 6 and then consummated at 9, that's 3 years of grooming. That's 3 years. If you don't understand that, I would urge you to look that up. What does grooming mean? It's not the cleaning up your apartment type of grooming. Just look it up. So if you take a child, a vulnerable child, and fill their head with ideas, not only that, and make them attached to a person, and then abuse that relationship to have intercourse, that is grooming. It's that easy. But unfortunately, there's a lot of Muslims who don't realize, and that's dangerous. That's scary to me and upsetting. Oh, man. All right.
I've written a detailed paper on this topic. It will be linked within the Google Drive document, but I'll speak about some of the stuff he said very briefly. First of all, the crawling thing. This is ridiculous and fallacious. So you're sat there trying to say that, oh, she got potty trained at 3, crawling at 1. This is what it's like today. You don't know what it was like back then. For example, did you know the concept of adulthood? Peter Gluckman, who's an endocrinologist, speaks about this, was you were considered an adult at the onset of puberty. Did Aisha attain puberty? Yes, she says this herself, I attained puberty. She says herself she was a woman. She experienced many stages of puberty. This is all what she says herself. Why are you so dismissive of what Aisha says? You only focus on when she says she's 9. You ignore everything else where she says she's mature. She was engaged to somebody called Jubair, and this was before she was engaged to the Prophet, peace be upon him. And do you know why the engagement was called off, Aladdin? It's because the parents of Jubair, they were scared that Aisha would convert their son to Islam. Do you think a 6-year-old today could do that, Aladdin? I mean, you love appearings in a modern day, so answer that. Also, again, things are different in the past. I think you're ignorant of history in general. I don't think you studied history at school. How old were people when they started working in the past? I mean, like in Victorian England and Tudors, etc. How old were they? How old were they when they went into battle in the past? Well, I can tell you, Aisha was on a battlefield of Uhud. She was on the battlefield during the Battle of Uhud, meaning she was, what, 11 years old, 12 years old? Do you think an 11-year-old should be on the battlefield today, Aladdin? You don't, do you? Where is your consistency? This is what I mean when it's all emotion. Then he speaks about grooming. Where is your evidence? Where is the dalil? You've got no evidence whatsoever. Again, it's his emotion. Prove it. This comes under the headline of abuse, sexual abuse. Prove the Prophet abused her. You will never be able to. She herself remarked about how good he was. The Prophet used to ask her permission to pray during the night, and she would say, I like it when you're close to me. She said that. She said it. She said, I like it when you're close to me. You bring up the hadith where it says your Lord hastens to fulfill your desires, or, I saw you referring to that. I'll leave a link in the description where it talks about that, but you're completely misrepresenting that too. Tell me, guys, who should we listen to when talking about the Prophet's marriage to Aisha? Aisha herself, where she literally said, she loves the Prophet, she likes it when he's close to him, i.e. in bed, she likes it. She said that herself. The Prophet said, I want to spend the night praying, but she's like, well, I like it when you're close to me. Well, hang on a second. That's Aisha herself saying that. What does that tell you? And the fact the Prophet asked her permission. He's saying, Aisha, let me spend the night worshipping my Lord. Why is he asking her permission? What does that tell you about their relationship? Anyway, who are you going to listen to? Some emotional apostate. All he does is misrepresent, appeal to emotion, false dichotomy. Or are you going to listen to Aisha herself? If you're fair and you're honest, you'll listen to Aisha herself. And in my paper, I literally provide you with narrations where she not only states her maturity, but it also shows how she's mentally mature, how she's knowledgeable, how she loved the Prophet, and how she actually wanted to be with the Prophet. Let me give you a scenario before I end this section off. Adam Johnson was a footballer who was arrested for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old girl. In the US, you'd call it soccer. Imagine you're the judge in a London courtroom. Adam Johnson is asked, what is his defence? And he says, the age of consent in France is 15, she was 15, therefore I did nothing wrong. What would you say in response? You would say that you can't compare the standards in France to the UK. Moreover, the crime was committed in the UK. It wasn't committed in France. Therefore, we judge you by British law. Then he says, okay, in that case, the age of consent in 1875 was 13. This girl was 15, therefore I did nothing wrong. The judge would respond, well, we don't live in 1875, the 19th century, we live in the 21st century. You commit the crime in the 21st century, thus we judge you by the laws today. Would you agree there? I think any sane, logical person would agree. Well, what you admit with this scenario is that you can't compare the actions done in one country by another country's laws, and you can't compare the actions done at one century by the laws of another century. As mentioned, I've written a paper on this subject, and I think it sufficiently refutes the claim, and it also talks about appeal to emotion, which is what Aladdin does. And let me tell you straight, I've talked about the age of Aisha in different refutation videos, and if anybody watching this video comments some rubbish, oh, she was 9, therefore it's bad, something like that, or you're bringing up stuff which I've talked about in my paper, your comment will be deleted and you'll be blocked from commenting. All that I ask is that you read my paper from start to finish. Is that too much to ask for? Like I said, that'll be linked in the description.
One is not, I wouldn't say it's linguistically miraculous, though that is a very subjective claim that could mean anything and everything. Like, is there something miraculous about writing down words on paper, no matter how amazing those words are? Is there something miraculous about a good book? Like, who's to say that some of the books out there are not miraculous because of how incredibly well written they are? It's extremely subjective, and that's why, for example, in English or Arabic class, at least back in my day, you never get 100% on writing because, it's always like it depends on who's looking at it. You can give the same piece of text to 2 teachers and they would give you 2 different grades. It's kind of arbitrary. So anyway, yeah, there's nothing linguistically miraculous about writing a book that has no mistakes. If the Quran had absolutely no mistakes or nothing that seemed out of place or anything like that. I was even told that there is not one letter that doesn't belong there or that is extra or excessive or redundant. Yet you find verses like, what was that verse? Yeah, I can't remember the surah that it's from, but it was like ليس على الأعمى حرج ولا على المريض حرج ولا على أنفسكم. No, it was a long verse. It wasn't just that. I can't remember at the moment, but it was basically saying there is no, translates to there is no shame, but what it means is there's nothing wrong with eating at your friend's house or your uncle's house or your own house, or if you're sick or if you're blind, or it's just such a dumb verse that means nothing and adds nothing to our understanding of the world. And it seems like a perfect book would not have a verse that is absolutely useless. Like, what do I gain from learning that I can eat at my friend's place? That's kind of the default. If my friend invited me, I'm going to eat there. Like, I don't need God to tell me that if I'm sick, there's no issue with eating. It's, yeah. So whenever someone says that it's miraculous, it's absurd to me.
Apostate Aladdin is a layman Arab. Just because he can read the language, speak the language, maybe even write the language, it does not mean he is an expert in the Arabic language. I can read English, I can write English, I can speak English. Does it mean I'm an expert in the English language? I've done a qualification in the English language. Does this mean I'm an expert? No, it does not. Now, he says on the topic of it being a miracle or not, that it is subjective. To some people, it could be a miracle. To others, it's not. I would say to those competent in the Arabic languages who have a deep understanding of Arabic linguistics, to them it's a miracle, to them it's unique. And we can look to the experts at the time of the Prophet, the experts in the Arabic language, the experts in poetry and soothsaying, and see what they say. You have instances which Al-Sayuti narrates, which you're going to see on screen, as well as Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, how he testifies that he's knowledgeable in poetry and soothsaying, and how he testifies that what the Prophet's reciting is unique. You also have Utbah, also known as Abu al-Walid, testifying to the uniqueness of the Quran. The Quraysh lauded him to a high level, saying that this man is knowledgeable when it comes to poetry. Yet the Quran had such a profound effect on him, it made his mind boggle. And this is coming up on screen now. So pause and read. As you guys know, with my refutation videos, with my response videos, I like to leave links in the description where you can learn more. Something I think which is relevant to this section is the challenge of the Quran when it asks to produce a surah like it. So I've linked a lecture done by Mansour from Speaker's Corner where he talks about this, he expands upon it. It's very interesting, and inshallah you'll find some benefit from it. And Aladdin, I do recommend you watch through that. So he mocks a verse from the Quran. He can't recall what verse he is referring to, but based on what he said, I did a bit of Googling, and I think he is referring to Surah An-Nur, Ayah 61, which says, well, you can read it on screen. And my response to this is, so what? I mean, how does this prove it's not from God because it's you know where to eat yourself? Question for you, Apostate Aladdin. Is Islam a religion or is it a way of life? It's both. Islam is a way of life. It governs how you do things, from society to marriage, to even how you go to the bathroom. It's a complete way of life. The religion is perfected. It says it in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Ayah 3. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. And in case you want context explaining to you, Quran.com has brilliant features like a footnote, and it says there is no blame on any of the free if they do not march forth in Allah's cause. Moreover, some Muslims would give their keys to their homes to one of those who could not march forth, namely the blind, the disabled or the sick, or their own relatives, and ask them to enter their houses and eat at will. But these people were shy to do that. So Apostate Aladdin, I don't know what he's on about here. What he says makes no sense.
The key factor about the traditional account is that Muhammad receives his first revelations in Mecca, and Mecca stands at a fabulous remove from the world of the Roman Empire, from this culture, this melting pot of Jewish and Christian and Roman traditions. Mecca, we are told, stood in the middle of a desert, and its inhabitants, we are also told, are pagan. According to Muslim tradition, there are no Jews, there are no Christians in Mecca. There were not communities from which Muhammad could have picked up these stories, according to the traditional Muslim account. And what is more, we are also told by Muslim tradition, despite the fact that actually it's contradicted within the Quran, but we're told in Muslim tradition that Muhammad was illiterate. So there was no prospect of him curling up with the Bible, picking up a few stories, a few references to Moses or the Virgin. And if that's the case, if Muhammad comes of age in a city that is pagan, that is 1,000 kilometers from the frontier with Palestine, if he is illiterate, then how on earth are we to explain this text, which is full of all these sophisticated cultural references, except as a bona fide miracle? It would seem, if we are to rely on the Muslim account of how the Quran came into being, that the divine must indeed have penetrated this mortal sublunar world of ours.
المتحدث هنا هو توم هولاند، مستشرق وصحفي بريطاني صاحب كتاب The Shadow of the Sword. يقول لنا: إذا صدقنا أن ما يقوله المسلمون عن سيرة نبيهم أن محمدا صلى الله عليه وسلم قد عاش في الحجاز في مكة في قلب الصحراء، وأنه كان بعيدا عن حدود فلسطين، وأنه كان أميا، وأن مكة هي بلد الوثنيين لم يكن فيها يهود ولا نصارى، فيجب عندها أو يبدو عندها كما يقول أنه علينا أن نصدق أن القرآن وحي وأن هذه نبوة صادقة.
So to say that it is subjective to say whether or not the Quran is a literary miracle is false. I will say that there will be some people out there who do not regard it as a miracle. These people, though, will be laymen or unaware of the Arabic language, incompetent of the Arabic language, or just ignorant of the Arabic language. But when you have experts, non-Muslims, like Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira and Abu al-Walid or Utbah, these were people who were experts in the poetry and soothsaying, and the Quraysh testified to this. The people around the Prophet, this was during the Prophet's life, when they are telling you that what he is reciting is, speechless, essentially speechless. It's not poetry. It's not soothsaying. It's not from man. It speaks volumes. To the non-Muslims watching this, if an Arab Muslim told you the Quran is a literary miracle, you probably wouldn't pay much attention. You would say, well, he's a Muslim. You would say that. But when you have accounts and reports from the time of the Prophet himself, from non-Muslim experts in the Arabic language, telling you the Quran is essentially unique and it can't have come from man, I think it will hold more word. I think it will. I know if I was a non-Muslim and I heard that, I would be like, they are confirming the Quran cannot be imitated. They're confirming the Quran is unique, that it can't come from man. Thus, the Prophet was truthful with his claim of prophethood. Now, I know some people may bring up, oh, well, Shakespeare's unique, or etc., etc., which is, I think, what Aladdin tried to allude to within the clip, although he never said it explicitly. There's a link in a description. It's a PDF document, or a Google Drive document, whatever it is. You'll click on it, and it's got subheadings, and you'll see under the subheading, it'll be titled something like The Quran, a Literary Miracle, and you'll see a bunch of links there. The article by Hamza Andreas Zortes talks about the Shakespeare objection that people may bring up. So check that out and check the other links out within that document as well.
Other people were writing down the Quran for him. There's a lot of poets from that time who didn't know how to write or read, but they used to say poetry. Like it's not like the Prophet didn't know how to use words or couldn't string a couple sentences together. There's even some poetry, I can't quote it off the top of my head, but it had to do with Surah Al-Tariq and Najm Al-Tariq, I think. I remember Abdullah Samir and Abdullah Gondal were talking about it. That piece of poetry, Quran plagiarized from it. It was older than the Quran. So it's not that inconceivable that he pieced together poems, or that a lot of it was attributed to him saying it when he didn't. It's not something that I care to argue about, but to think that he was illiterate, therefore he couldn't have, came up with verses, therefore this is from Allah, is a very flawed line of thinking. I mean, if we agree that it was very odd that someone who is illiterate and doesn't know how to speak, apparently, in poetry or in prose, came up with a Quran, I'll agree with you. I'll be like, that's a mystery. I wonder how that happened. But to say, therefore it came from Allah, is nonsensical. There's a huge leap in logic there.
So first of all, the Prophet, peace be upon him, hated poetry. Second of all, as we've shown in the last section, you have experts in poetry like Abu al-Walid, Utbah, and Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira testifying to the fact the Quran is not poetry. That alone dismisses your entire premise over here. Second of all, you're appealing to Abdullah Samir and Abdullah Gondal. Both of them, especially Abdullah Samir, incompetent in the Arabic language, like really bad in the Arabic language. As for Abdullah Gondal, The same guy who attempted the Quranic challenge and produced Surah Fa Qaf. Obviously, you can guess what he's trying to say with that. And he literally copied entire sentences from the Quran. Entire sentences. And what you're on about, you know, in Surah Tariq or Najm Tariq, I read Surah Tariq. That's nowhere in there. Or Najm Tariq. That, as you said it's not in Surah Tariq. So I don't know what you're referring to. But let's talk about Abdullah Sami and Abdullah Gondal. Okay, there are videos in that PDF document where you can watch them fully. Have a look at this.
Have you seen this before in the Quran? فَلَا تَكْتُمُونَ اللَّهَ مَا فِي نُفُوسِكُمْ.
فَلَا تَكْتُمُونَ. Let's see what it says. فَلَا تَكْتُمُنَّ اللَّهَ مَا فِي نُفُوسِكُمْ. So first of all, you can't freaking read the line of poetry, which isn't like that big of a surprise. I mean, in the video I put up yesterday, you couldn't even pronounce the word chicken in Arabic correctly.
إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الدَّجَّاجَ خَلْقًا.
Okay, but these are the similarities, supposedly. This is the copy paste. This is the plagiarism that he's speaking of. On the top you have the Quran. He knows what is spoken openly and what you conceal. And in the bottom, the line by Zuhair, or the poem by Zuhair. So don't conceal from Allah what is within you to hide it, for whatever is concealed from Allah is known by Him. This is plagiarism, according to Jalal ad-Din here. And he says it's plagiarism because there's a similarity in style. No, there isn't. There is no similarity in style. The structure's completely different. A lot of different words. This cannot be plagiarism. How is this in any way comparable to the example that I showed in the beginning of the video?
Now, what I also wanted to show you guys is,
Malakat?
yes, this is from the Mu'allaqat. Yes. Bukran Bukura. These kind of repetition styles.
Okay, so first of all, it's not Bukran Bukura, it's Bakarna Bukura. Again, this guy can't even read the stuff that's in front of him, but he has the ability to critique the Quran.
So what he's basically arguing is that the concept of emphasis is exclusive to pre-Islamic poetry.
Let's carry on.
Fansafa, another style that you're getting from pre-Islamic courts. And I can keep showing you words upon words where I'll show you this this identical lift.
Identical lift.
From another poet. And the words actually occur in the surah 69, I believe. Yeah, like they occurred word to word like this. Ala arja'iha. Okay, if you can see that.
Yep. Okay, so this is what he's quoting. Check it out. The angels are on its sides, and on that day 8 angels will be carrying the throne. On its sides meaning the sides of the throne. The poetry says the feathers of pigeons are on its sides, the sides of the water, and that causes hearts to race. Okay. Now, he's claiming that ala arja'iha or ala arja'ih is an act of plagiarism. Saying on its sides is an act of plagiarism. So, like, the Quran can't say on its sides. This is so silly. This is so dumb. This is not something specific to the Quran. This is not something specific to poetry. This is just people. These are words that people use. Everyone says on its sides. It's just a common. It's just a. It's like it's nothing. It's nothing special. It's nothing special. This guy, he's saying that the Quran ripped off complete sentences from the Mu'allaqat. Okay? And this is what he's bringing.
Well, these are just a few examples, and we have a lot to cover. Like I can show you other examples. Like I've highlighted a few. Laysa biha minhum.
Laysa biha minhum. This is not in the Quran. This is not something specific to or exclusive to pre-Islamic poetry. It just means no one from among them. Which is a basic common line. You even find this in hadith. Not even by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You have Aisha saying this.
So what is the significance of these similarities? Of the Quran using phrases from pre-Islamic poetry? What's the big deal? Why is that a problem?
Wallahi,
So this ties back into the challenge, right? And one of the problems is with language is because you are tied in a certain set of rules of either vocabulary or grammar and sentence structures or expressions, okay, or form of expression. Now, it's in one way to approach it, it's inevitable because you're using the same language or similar language, you will eventually end up expressing yourself in similar ways. Or you can just say that we're ripping it off. And what I'm going to bring back to is Surah Faqaf, where some things can only be expressed in a certain way. So saying that, oh, it was championed by the Quran.
So this verse can only be expressed, or these words can only be expressed in this particular way. Anyways, guys, I'm sorry for, inshallah, this wasn't a waste of your time. I hope you were somewhat entertained, because sometimes when you see how bad these arguments are that these people make, you realize the level of the criticism that's brought forward. And by the way, this is coming from someone who has absolutely not just no respect for the Quran, but no respect for the classical poets. I saw this tweet by him yesterday where he's suggesting that iltifat, okay, not just in the Quran is a problem. He's suggesting that iltifat in pre-Islamic poetry is a problem.
Abdullah Samir made a video where he said the Quran plagiarized pre-Islamic poetry. It's just him alone, him sat down on his comfy little sofa. And all the examples Abdullah Samir gives, but one, are after the Prophet's death. I mean, I don't know why you're appealing to these people, Apostate Aladdin. Now, you said it's not something you care to argue, but it's something you need to be corrected on, because you're fooled by Gondal and Samir. Check the link out in the description, check the relevant subheading, it'll be called something like plagiarized poetry, and you can go through the videos and realise how Abdullah Samir and Gondal's claims are baseless. I mean, Gondal can't even read Arabic words properly, yet apparently he has discovered the Quran plagiarized poetry, yet the experts that lived at the Prophet's time never made this claim. And actually they argued against it. But I guess Gondal knows best, huh, Aladdin?
What's the biggest reason that made you leave Islam? Like I said before, there's not one reason or another. So to answer you, there's a video coming up about that. But if you want just off the top of my head, one reason that makes me have a very hard time believing that this is from a fair God. I've spoken about this. It's one of the first videos that I made on this channel. It's the game of luck, that is where you are born. What kind of mentality you have is partly inherited from your environment, be it, you know, your parents, your community, your country. So there's billions upon billions of people historically, globally, who either haven't heard of Islam at all, which, you know, Muslims say they're going to be tested in the afterlife, which, you know, is nonsensical to me, or they have heard of Islam and they haven't heard enough to actually be curious to look into it, or they have and they've looked into it and they don't believe it. So many people are predisposed to not join Islam. Like, how rare are these? The conversion stories are one in I don't know how many thousands or tens of thousands or 100,000s. What about the rest who didn't convert? Like, to me, when Muslims say that, it just shows that anyone has a chance to be saved. But why is it that statistically most people in non-Muslim countries are going to hell? Statistically. Is it because God knew these souls were worse, so he sent them all in the same place that is not a Muslim country? It just, that game of luck and chance does not make sense to me, especially when this belief is grounds for torture, eternal torture.
So he has an issue with eternal hellfire. He sees that as unjust, it's unfair. He brings up the geography argument as a case for this. He also brings up the typical Muslim response, which is that we believe some disbelievers will be tested in the next life. He says that's nonsensical. Why is that nonsensical, Aladdin? You have to explain that. You simply can't say, it's nonsensical to me. Why is it nonsensical? It makes complete sense. Allah in the Quran says He's going to test the believers in this life. That's in Surah Al-Ankabut, the spider, verse number 2, which reads, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون. Do people think once they say we believe that they will not be left without being put to the test? So it's logical and it's just and it's fair that the kuffar who haven't heard the message of Islam, they will be tested in the next life. That is fair and that is just. Explain, Aladdin, how this is nonsensical. Now I'm going to play a few video clips. It'll be quite long, but the full video clips will be linked in a description in that PDF document under the relevant subheading. Aladdin, check it out. It is there to benefit you.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. هل كل من ليس مسلما فهو في النار؟ الجواب المباشر لا، والتفصيل كما سنرى. وأظن أن هذه إخواني من الكلمات المهمة التي توضح لك الموضوع بشكل جيد، خاصة وأنه يحصل فيه خلط شديد. سآتي لكم بكلام لثلاثة من الأئمة من مدرستين مختلفتين، ابن تيمية وابن القيم وأبي حامد الغزالي. سترى من كلامهم أن غير المسلمين ينقسمون إلى 4 أقسام، ولكل قسم حكمه. دعونا نذكر هذه الأقسام أولا ثم نطلع على كلام الأئمة. القسم الأول الذين لم يسمعوا برسول الله محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ورسالته أصلا، وهؤلاء لا يعاقبهم الله. القسم الثاني الذين سمعوا برسول الله وصفاته ومعجزاته وأنه يدعو إلى عبادة الله وحده لا شريك له فكفروا، فهؤلاء من أهل النار. القسم الثالث الذين سمعوا برسول الله لكن سماعا غير صحيح، يعني سمعوا ضد أوصافه، سماعا لا تقوم الحجة بمثله عليهم ولا يستثيرهم للنظر والتحقق من أمره، فهؤلاء كالقسم الأول لا يعاقبهم الله. القسم الرابع الذين سمعوا برسول الله ورسالته لكن قدرا غير كاف، إلا أن القدر الذي بلغهم يجب أن يستثيرهم ليتحققوا ويبحثوا ويسألوا، لكنهم أعرضوا عن ذلك لعدم اهتمامهم بأمر الدين كله وتفضيلهم للحياة الدنيا، فهؤلاء أيضا يعاقبهم الله، وكفرهم يسمى كفر إعراض، يعني إعراض عن أمر الدين بالكلية وعدم اهتمام به. قد تقول طيب والذي سمع بالنبي واطلع على الإسلام وأدلته لكن لم يقتنع بها، هذا مع الصنف الثاني الكافر كفر جحود وتكذيب والمستحق للعذاب. فأدلة الله على صحة الإسلام، أدلة الإسلام مقنعة لكل منصف طالب للحق، ومن يكفر بها فلأمراض قلبه وعمى بصيرته التي استحقها بأفعاله. قال الله تعالى: ولقد أنزلنا إليك آيات بينات وما يكفر بها إلا الفاسقون. إذن يا إخواني مرة أخرى، الذي لم يسمع بالنبي ورسالته أصلا لا يعاقب، الذي سمع ورفض كافر كفر جحود ويعاقب، الذي سمع سماعا غير صحيح لا تقوم به الحجة لا يعاقب، والذي سمع قدرا يجب أن يحركه للتحقق لو كان مهتما بأمر الدين لكنه أعرض كافر كفر إعراض ويعاقب. أنا أعلم أن الأمر سيثير الكثير من التساؤلات وليس هذا مقام الجواب عنها، فالموضوع يحتاج تفصيلا كثيرا، يحتاج حديثا عن مسألة العذر بالجهل وعدم العذر بالجهل وأدلة كل فريق، ويحتاج تعريفا للسماع الذي تقوم به الحجة، يعني إنسان سمع عن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام وعن القرآن وأنه تحدى الناس فلم يأتوا بمثله، لكنه سمع مع ذلك تشويها للإسلام. التشويه حاصل في كل زمان من أيام نبينا عليه الصلاة والسلام، لكن هذا السماع عن أنه رسول يدعو لعبادة الله وحده يحرك الفطرة التي تنجذب للتوحيد ويجب أن يدفعه للتحقق. فما المقدار الذي يجعله من أهل القسم الثالث وما المقدار الذي يجعله من أهل القسم الرابع؟ ثم الذين لا يعاقبون، هل تشملهم رحمة الله كما قال الغزالي أم أن الله يمتحنهم يوم القيامة كما رجح ابن تيمية؟ طيب يا ترى أكثر غير المسلمين في زماننا في عصرنا هل هم من الصنف الأول أم من الثاني أم من الثالث أم من الرابع؟ تساؤلات كثيرة، لكن الذي يهمنا هنا هو بيان أن السؤال ليس له جواب واحد، أن كل من ليس مسلما فهو في النار. الموضوع مش هيك يا جماعة، ليس هكذا. والذي يهمنا أيضا أن نوضح أن هناك من يلبس على المسلمين فينفرهم من القول بأن كل من ليس مسلما فهو في النار، ثم يعطيك بديلا باطلا فيقول لا، افرض أن هذا غير المسلم اطلع على حقيقة الإسلام فلم يقتنع، افرض أنه اطلع لكنه نفر من الإسلام لسوء أخلاق المسلمين. يعني تتوقع كل ما ادعى أحد النبوة أن ينظر هؤلاء في الدعوة ويتحققوا؟ هذه كلها ليست أعذارا. نحن إخواني لا نتكلم عن دين كالأديان الباطلة، بل دين له رصيد في الفطرة التي فطر الله الناس عليها، ولا نتكلم عن رسول كمدعي النبوة، بل الفرق بينه وبينهم كما الفرق بين الليل والنهار. وترى من يجعل شروط إقامة الحجة تعجيزية ويقول إذا أردت أن تقيم الحجة على فيلسوف يجب أن تكون فيلسوفا مثله، ويقول لك الطريقة الوحيدة أن نقنع غير المسلمين بالإسلام هي أن نقنعهم أننا لسنا مسلمين لسوء وضعنا، ويرسم لك صورة سوداوية للمسلمين متجاهلا كل النماذج المشرقة في زماننا، وفي النهاية لا تقوم الحجة على أحد ولا داعي أن ندعو إلى ديننا على هذه الطريقة، وهذا كلام باطل. أنا ما تكلمت في هذا الأمر إخواني إلا لتطمئن النفوس إلى عدل الله تعالى ورحمته، ثم بعد ذلك اجعل تركيزك على شيء واحد، تجيب عن سؤال ما المطلوب مني تجاه غير المسلمين؟ أن أدعوهم إلى دين الله تعالى، وأتحلى بالأخلاق الطيبة، وأسعى لإتقان أدواري في عمارة الأرض لئلا أفتنهم عن ديني، ثم دع أمرهم لله تعالى. من قامت عليه الحجة ومن لم تقم لا ننشغل بهذا، بل انشغل بأن تكون أداة الله تعالى في رحمة عباده وإقامة الحجة عليهم واستنقاذهم من النار. تمام يا جماعة؟ تعالوا الآن إلى كلام الأئمة، وسأقتصر على مواضع مركزة للاختصار. تعالوا نرى كلام ابن تيمية بداية في كتابه الجواب الصحيح لمن بدل دين المسيح. قال رحمه الله: وهنا أصل لا بد من بيانه، وهو أنه قد دلت النصوص على أن الله لا يعذب إلا من أرسل إليه رسولا تقوم به الحجة عليه. ثم قال: فأما من تعمد تحريف الكتاب لفظه أو معناه وعرف ما جاء به الرسول، يعني من أهل الكتاب، وعرف ما جاء به الرسول يعني محمد عليه الصلاة والسلام فعانده، فهذا مستحق للعقاب. وكذلك من فرط في طلب الحق واتباعه متبعا لهواه مشتغلا عن ذلك بدنياه، اللي سميناه كفر الإعراض. إلى أن قال: والقول الثالث وعليه السلف والأئمة. إذن يا جماعة هذا القول الذي ستسمعونه هو قول السلف والأئمة وليس ابن تيمية وحده. قال: أنه لا يعذب إلا من بلغته الرسالة، ولا يعذب إلا من خالف الرسل كما دل عليه الكتاب والسنة. قال تعالى لإبليس: لأملأن جهنم منك وممن تبعك منهم أجمعين. إلى أن قال ابن تيمية: ومن لم تقم عليه الحجة في الدنيا بالرسالة كالأطفال والمجانين وأهل الفترات، يعني الذين لم تبلغهم الدعوة، فهؤلاء فيهم أقوال أظهرها يعني الأرجح عنده ما جاءت به الآثار أنهم يمتحنون يوم القيامة، فيبعث الله إليهم من يأمرهم بطاعته، فإن أطاعوه استحقوا الثواب، وإن عصوه استحقوا العقاب. تمام يا جماعة؟ الآن ابن القيم رحمه الله في كتابه طريق الهجرتين عند الحديث عن مراتب المكلفين قال: لا بد في هذا المقام من تفصيل به يزول الإشكال. إلى أن قال أن العذاب يستحق بسببين: أحدهما الإعراض عن الحجة وعدم إرادة العلم بها وبموجبها، اللي هو كفر الإعراض. الثاني العناد لها بعد قيامها وترك إرادة موجبها، اللي هو كفر الجحود العناد. قال: فالأول كفر إعراض والثاني كفر عناد. وأما كفر الجهل مع عدم قيام الحجة وعدم التمكن من معرفتها فهذا الذي نفى الله التعذيب عنه حتى تقوم حجة الرسل. إنسان جاهل لم يتمكن من معرفة أدلة الإسلام، قال لك هذا نفى الله التعذيب عنه حتى تقوم حجة الرسل. ثم قال: الأصل الثالث أن قيام الحجة يختلف باختلاف الأزمنة والأمكنة والأشخاص، فقد تقوم حجة الله على الكفار في زمان دون زمان، وفي بقعة وناحية دون أخرى، كما أنها تقوم على شخص دون آخر. شوف يا جماعة مدى الدقة عند ابن القيم رحمة الله عليه، بل هناك تفاصيل أكثر دقة في هذا الموضوع وفي هذا الموضع من الكتاب طريق الهجرتين، لكن لا مجال لتفصيله حتى نختصر لكم. أبو حامد الغزالي رحمة الله عليه في كتابه فيصل التفرقة بين الإسلام والزندقة قال رحمه الله: بل أقول إن أكثر نصارى الروم والترك في هذا الزمان تشملهم الرحمة إن شاء الله تعالى، أعني الذين هم في أقاصي الروم والترك ولم تبلغهم الدعوة، فإنهم 3 أصناف: صنف لم يبلغهم اسم محمد أصلا فهم معذورون، وصنف بلغهم اسمه ونعته يعني صفته وما ظهر عليه من المعجزات، وهم المجاورون لبلاد الإسلام والمخالطون لهم، وهم الكفار الملحدون. وصنف ثالث بين الدرجتين بلغهم اسم محمد ولم يبلغهم نعته وصفته، بل سمعوا أيضا منذ الصبا أن كذابا ملبسا اسمه محمد ادعى النبوة، حاشا. فهؤلاء عندي في معنى الصنف الأول، فإنهم مع أنهم سمعوا اسمه سمعوا ضد أوصافه، وهذا لا يحرك داعية النظر، يعني ما سمعوا عن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام شيئا يستثيرهم ليستعلموا عن أمره ويتأملوا في دعوى النبوة. قال رحمه الله الغزالي: وأما من سائر الأمم فمن كذبه بعدما قرع سمعه على التواتر خروجه وصفته ومعجزاته الخارقة للعادة كشق القمر وتسبيح الحصى ونبع الماء من بين أصابعه والقرآن المعجز الذي تحدى به أهل الفصاحة فعجزوا عنه، فإذا قرع سمعه فأعرض عنه وتولى ولم ينظر فيه ولم يتأمل ولم يبادر إلى التصديق فهذا هو الجاحد الكاذب وهو الكافر، ولا يدخل في هذا أكثر الروم والترك الذين بعدت بلادهم عن بلاد الإسلام. إلى أن يقول الغزالي: بل أقول يعني قال الغزالي: من قرع سمعه هذا فلا بد أن تنبعث منه داعية الطلب ليستبين حقيقة الأمر إن كان من أهل الدين ولم يكن من الذين استحبوا الحياة الدنيا على الآخرة. إنسان يهمه أمر الدين، يهمه أن يكون يعني مظهرا لله خالقه وبارئه ورازقه العرفان، يا رب كيف أعبدك، هذا إنسان يهتم بالدين، فلا بد أن تنبعث منه داعية الطلب ليستبين حقيقة الأمر إن كان من أهل الدين ولم يكن من الذين استحبوا الحياة الدنيا على الآخرة. فإن لم تنبعث فيه هذه الداعية ما اهتمش، فذلك لركونه إلى الدنيا وخلوه عن الخوف وخطر أمر الدين، وذلك كفر. وإن انبعثت الداعية فقصر عن الطلب فهو أيضا كفر. وأظنكم إخواني قد لاحظتم وجود تشابه كبير بين الأئمة الثلاثة، وأنصحكم أيضا بقراءة إجابة بعنوان حكم من لم يسمع بالإسلام من النصارى في موقع الإسلام سؤال وجواب للشيخ محمد المنجد فرج الله عنه. وأسأل الله أن يكون هذا التفصيل نافعا وأن يتقبل منا ومنكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
The next objection concerns what is known in the literature, in the philosophical literature, as the demographics of theism objection. So basically it goes something like this. If you were born in Saudi Arabia, you're more likely to be a Muslim than if you were born in a religious Hindu family in India or religious Christian family in the United States, and so on. Undoubtedly, our upbringing has an influence on us, as we do tend to share the values and beliefs of our parents. And clearly, we did not choose the circumstances of our birth. And being born into the right religion appears to give such people a big advantage over others born into false religions. Those born into false religions appear to have many more barriers to overcome in order to attain salvation. And so the objection goes, that's not fair. I mean, God, as those raising the objection would contend, God should give everybody an equal opportunity at salvation. A number of comments could be made here. So first of all, God does not owe human beings equal levels of opportunity. There's nothing about his attributes that necessitates us. We need to stop. We need to stop subjecting God to our human moral standards. We human beings typically give people equal chances of opportunity at a number of things, even though there appear to be many exceptions. But I don't wish to digress. Let's assume that human beings always give other human beings equal chances at things. As for God, all that matters is that he is just, and that justice is manifested by his promise that he will not bear people burdens that they cannot carry. It is his prerogative to give harder tests to people as he pleases. I mean, he is God after all. The main thing to believe, however, is that he won't punish people for tests, for failing tests. They had no chance of passing. Moreover, how do we really know that believers and non-believers aren't ultimately treated equally? If you recall, we said earlier that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could and does intervene to help people become guided or remain on the path of guidance, as long as the higher order desire to truly want to acquire religious truth is there. Well, perhaps Allah's level of intervention to assist a truly sincere non-believer in a non-Muslim land is greater in its extent than the divine intervention that he makes to keep a Muslim living in a Muslim land steadfast upon the deen. In other words, Allah's level of divine intervention to guide people offsets the perceived apparent imbalance between people living in different circumstances, and it also compensates for whatever extra barriers one may have to overcome. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give the optimal amount of guidance to each person in accordance with the level of difficulty of their circumstances, as long as they have the correct higher order desire to seek religious truth, to truly seek religious truth. So all in all, things may very well equally balance out. Secondly, keeping aside the fact that there are converts to Islam and apostates from Islam, and how this observable fact serves as proof that it's possible to overcome demographic barriers, it's widely common. It's widely common to see people rebelling against their parents, and rebelling against the traditions of their family, wanting to be different and shifting away from their parents' old, boring traditional norms, and seeking to be modern and open-minded. I mean, it's enough seeing the shifting trends in religious thought in countries that were predominantly Christian just a century ago and are now becoming more anti-religious. I mean, look at the rise in acceptance of LGBT and other radical shifts in sexual ethics, for instance. There have been so many wide-ranging and significant ideological and cultural shifts just in these two past generations alone. So what we need to acknowledge here, is that people clearly have it in them. They have it in them to go against what their parents have taught them. They have it in them to look back at their upbringing and say, I disagree with that. I want to be different. And that happens a lot, especially as people get older and get exposed to different perspectives. Yet the problem is that most people, unfortunately, make awfully wrong decisions. So this whole idea of people supposedly being born into embracing certain beliefs and customs and are psychologically unable to reject them is an argument that can only go so far. There's no denying that being born into a non-Muslim family is a barrier. And that being born into a practicing Muslim family is a gift and blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the question is that barrier overcomable? That's the main question. But someone may insist that if that same disbeliever were to have been born into a Muslim family, then he would have died a Muslim. But again, so what? I mean, as we said, Allah does not owe anybody anything. Similar to the beggar's analogy that we gave earlier. The only thing that suffices to say at this point is that as long as Allah is not demanding something unbearable from an individual and punishing him on account of it, then the argument fumbles. And by the way, this is notwithstanding philosophical issues pertaining to identity here. I mean, many would argue that I, Bassam Zawadi, am only Bassam Zawadi because I was born into a particular family in a particular time and place, and I am who I am because of all the experiences that I went through, which shaped my personality. Thus, if my soul were to have been placed in a different body, born under completely different circumstances, then I wouldn't necessarily be Bassam Zawadi anymore. I'd have a different name, a different attitude, different life experiences, etc. So to even talk about us being the same people, being born in different contexts, has its own philosophical issues. But I'm not going to dwell on that. And again, how far do we want to go with this argument? Shall we start excusing racists because they were born into racist families? Shall we start excusing Nazis because if you or I were born in Germany in the first half of the 20th century, we might have ended up as Nazis as well? Or how about we look at other demographic variables, like social class? Shall we now start making excuses for people who were born into rich materialistic families and had more dunya temptations to overcome, and as a result became heedless and forgetful of God and the afterlife due to the many dunya distractions? Should we say, oh, poor rich people, they didn't choose to be born rich and get distracted by all those temptations? Where and when do the excuses end? Or do we do something more reasonable? Do we do something more reasonable and tell ourselves, okay, clearly these people born into challenging circumstances have been brainwashed or tempted, and we need to inform them that they are wrong. We need to show them proof that they are wrong for holding the views that they hold. We can understand and appreciate that if nobody tried to convey to them that they are wrong, that they may continue to hold the views that they do because that's what they were taught to believe. However, for them to continue holding on to their views, even after being conveyed that they shouldn't, subjects them to just and fair rebuke. And I'd contend that this is the attitude that we have for people believing any other negative thing. So why hold a different standard when it comes to false religions then? Moreover, suppose geography is truly a barrier to someone with the sincere higher order desire to seek and accept religious truth. Well, in that case, a person is expected to exert effort in migrating away from that land. أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. Wasn't Allah's earth vast enough so that you could migrate therein? Also, we can't forget the role of Satan in all of this. Despite being resistible, Satan is one of the causal factors influencing people to make wrong decisions. Many of us tend to forget the supernatural forces at play here and only focus on searching for secular explanations for why people make the moral and spiritual decisions that they do, such as one's geographical location of his birth. I strongly believe at this point, that any further objections related to this argument would only arise out of a personal dislike for how God created the world with its division and distribution of barrier, its distribution of believers and disbelievers, as opposed to, there being a clear definitive argument for why God, with the attributes that he has, could or would not have created the world in this manner.
So I just realised, having recorded the Hellfire segment, that this video is going to push over 50 minutes, and there is more I would like to respond to based on what Aladdin has said, but then the video will be over an hour long. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to make another response to Aladdin. The other response that will come out in a few days, inshallah, will be similar to this one in relation to its layout. I will respond to 4 or 5 different things Aladdin has said and put it all together in one video and put a PDF document in a description. Timestamps will be there too. Now Aladdin, if you're watching this, stay tuned for my second video. In the meantime, I hope you watch this video fully from start to finish, being fair and impartial, and check the link out in the description. It is there to help you. The question I have for you in the meantime, and I guess you'll only answer this if you've made it this far into the video and you decide to respond. If the doubts you have regarding Islam were adequately answered, would you come back to the religion? This is more so to test whether or not you are sincere. For the rest of you guys who are watching this, I hope you found some benefit from this video. Be sure to check out the link in the description. Inshallah that benefits you as well. And I'll see you in the next video, which will likely be another response to Apostate Aladdin. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.